Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Mound-Builders of Ancient America. Were they migrants from Atlantis? By Carl Thomas. An article taken from Rosicrucian Digest, Volume 16, Number 7, August 1938. Mound-Builders of Ancient America. Were they migrants from Atlantis? By Carl Thomas. Sometime during the remote past, there flourished and waned a race of people in what is now known as the eastern half of the United States. This ancient nation throve in all that part of the country that can be enclosed by drawing a line from Wisconsin southeastward to western New York, south to middle Florida, westward to the mouth of the Rio Grande, thence northward to Wisconsin. In some respects, they developed a civilization equal to our own, and in certain other respects, it may be said that their civilization was inferior to ours. They have been surrounded with an air of mystery because it has not been decided where they came from nor where they went. Neither is there any agreement as to what race they belonged, nor by what name they called themselves. The most characteristic thing about their archaeological monuments is that they are invariably in the form of pyramidal mounds or square enclosures, or both. Due to this fact, they have become known as the mound builders. The ruins discovered, however, are not all in the shape of pyramids or squares. Many are rectangular or circular, while some are hexagonal, octagonal, or elliptic. Most of the higher ruins have winding stairways leading to the top. There's a considerable range in the size of the mounds, too. For example, there is a mound at Grave Creek, West Virginia, 70 feet high and 1,000 feet around at the base. The Great Truncated Pyramid at Cahokia, Illinois, is 1,000 feet long, over 700 feet wide, and 100 feet high. In the lower Mississippi Valley, the mounds average from 1 to 30 feet high and are spread out over a larger horizontal area. What purpose did these mounds serve? Several theories have been advanced in answer to this question. One investigator suggests they were used as defense works, another that they were pagan religious altars, another that they were used as burial grounds. But the most general opinion is that they were built to be used as foundations for the most important buildings of that particular city or town. It has been pointed out that if such is the case, why is it that not a single mound has been discovered with the ruins of a structure on top of it? It is true enough, say the critics, that similar pyramidal mounds have been found in Mexico and Central America, nearly every one of which has a ruined building on its top. But that is no reason to suppose that these other mounds were used for the same purpose. Well, we can agree on that and still win our argument. Many of the great structures reared on such pyramidal foundations at Palenque, Uxmal, and elsewhere in the Central American district are still extant because they were built of hewn stone laid in mortar. We all know there are no extensive building stone deposits in the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, so it is not unreasonable to say that the mound builders used the more abundant but more perishable medium of wood. At that time, the country was covered with dense forests, but if timber was used, it would have disintegrated into dust centuries ago. There is evidence to show, too, that sun-dried mud bricks were used in the lower Mississippi Valley. One of the most notable features of the work of the mound builders is their symmetrical and mystical design. The square works are always found to be exact geometrical squares, and the circular works are always found to be exact geometrical circles. At Marietta, Ohio, there is a perfectly square mound with the shape of a Greek cross superimposed. Very often, the geometrical figures are combinations of a square and two circles. In Michigan, Iowa, Missouri, and more particularly Wisconsin, there have been found enclosures, the outlines of which are strikingly suggestive of gigantic bas-reliefs of animals, birds, serpents, men, and geometrical figures. It seems probable that this race intended these as a record of all animal life existing at that period. There is a particularly interesting mound in Adams County, Ohio, that has been named Great Serpent Mound. This monument is in the form of a mammoth snake more than 1,000 feet long, 5 feet high, and 25 to 30 feet thick. The tail of the figure is coiled so as to form 3 concentric circles, and the mouth is wide open and seems to be ejecting a figure that might have been intended to represent an egg. The egg is 4 feet high and is a perfectly regular ellipse in outline with a major diameter of 160 feet and a minor diameter of 80 feet. The whole figure considered together reminds one strongly of the ancient Indian cosmological idea of the serpent and the egg, or the egg from which the Japanese said the world emerged, or the symbolical egg that issued from the mouth of the Egyptian god Kneph, or the Magian egg of Ormuzd, from which came the principles of good and evil, or the tale of ancient astrology which asserts that the human soul descended to earth through the sign of the serpent. And did you think of the serpent and the apple in the Garden of Eden? In Pike County, Ohio, there is a monument in the form of a perfect circle, inside of which is a perfect square. The square is so constructed that its 4 sides face the geographical north, east, south, and west, and the gates of the square and circle are right in line with each other and open out toward the geographical east. Near Brownsville, Ohio, there is a large enclosure in the form of an ellipse that reminds one of the sun just at the instant it leaves the horizon in the morning and begins soaring. If you have never noticed it, at that time the sun apparently has a slightly shorter diameter vertically than horizontally, as though it were crouching to leap into the heavens. At Liberty, Ohio, there is a works that is a combination of 3 circles and a square. The square is so constructed that the 4 corners correspond with the 4 cardinal points of the compass. In other words, if a line were traced from one corner diagonally to the opposite corner, that line would be an east-west line, and if another line were traced from a third corner diagonally to the opposite corner, that line would be a north-south line. Everywhere that ruins of the Mound-Builders have been found, there is evidence of the peculiar combination of knowledge and lack of knowledge. Near Piketon, Ohio, there's a fragment of a graded roadway that is still used. All over the country, there are remains of graded avenues and roads. Can we say that our own highways will be in evidence 5,000 years hence? These people had a sufficient knowledge of mathematics to enable them to construct large earthworks very accurately. When you learn that there is evidence indicating they used a standard unit of measure, and that many of their geometrical figures covered a square mile, you can understand the degree of skill they had attained in the science of engineering. They had a knowledge of astronomy and studied the heavens, yet there has been found not one bit of evidence to indicate they had developed a system of chronology. They built large cities all over that district and had presumably developed a system of central government, but they never invented a system of written communication. Another of the interesting features of this extinct civilization is that their centers of population agree with the present centers of population in the United States. Cincinnati, Hamilton and Dayton, Ohio, Louisville, St. Louis, St. Paul, Memphis, New Orleans, all of these cities are near cities of the Mound-Builders. Several of their abandoned copper mines show that they had a knowledge of the mechanics of levers and pulleys, but they had never invented a conveyance to carry their copper from the mine to the city. A high artistic sense is seen in the artifacts that have been taken from many of the mounds. Beautifully designed and finished vases and other articles of pottery, ornaments of silver, bone and mica from the Alleghenies, and shells from the Gulf of Mexico have been found. There are listed a large variety of ornaments and implements made of copper, silver, obsidian, porphyry, granite, jasper, quartz and greenstone, all being finely made and wrought. Articles made of stone show an exceptional degree of workmanship, and most of them are finely carved. Copper seems to have played a major role in the life of the Mound-Builders. Axes, single and double, adzes, chisels, drills, gravers, lance heads, knives, bracelets, pendants, beads, etc. have been found, all made of copper. Some investigators assert that many of the metal objects were cast. There is evidence indicating that the Mound-Builders had learned the art of weaving and spinning cloth. Fragments of charred cloth made of spun fibers have been found in the mounds. A specimen of such cloth, taken from a mound in Butler County, Ohio, is in Blackmore Museum, Salisbury. In the same collection are several lumps of burnt clay which formed part of the altar, so called in a mound in Ross County, Ohio. To this clay, a few charred threads are still attached. International Congress of Prehistoric Archaeology, Norwich, England, 1868. During the archaeological excavation of 3 mounds near Elizabethtown, West Virginia, a number of stone tubes were found. 3 of them were made of steatite, and they were all finely made and polished. The longest was 12 and the shortest 8 inches. Their external diameter measured 1.4 inches and the internal diameter 0.8 inches. The internal diameter was uniform to within 3/8 of an inch of one end of the tube, where it diminishes to 0.2 inch. Anyone with a knowledge of astronomy and astronomical instruments will tell you that an object so shaped makes a very efficient telescope tube. Archaeologists have generally agreed that this was the purpose the tube served and have labeled them antique tube telescope device. Extending from the northern shore of Lake Superior, there is a peninsula shaped like an immense horn named Kuinor Point. It is about 80 miles long by about 45 miles wide, where it joins the mainland. All through this district and on the nearby Isle Royale, there are extensive copper deposits. This copper is distinctive in that it is not in the form of ore, but is found as pure metal. All through it, there are found lumps of pure silver, not alloyed with the copper, but a mixture of splotches of pure silver and pure copper. No other copper deposit exhibits this striking mark. Wherever a ruin of the Mound-Builders has been dug into, there have been found copper ornaments and implements made of silver-studded copper. One of the hardest things to do in a survey of the Mound-Builders is to present an accurate estimate of the time at which they occupied the country. Geological evidence indicates that it is a hopeless task to try to count the years since the last mounds were constructed. Every skeleton so far taken from a mound was in the nth degree of disintegration, crumbling into dust on exposure to the air. Not more than half a dozen crania have been recovered in anything approaching a good condition, and even these are of doubtful authenticity. The few fragments of Stone Age skeletons that have been unearthed in Europe were all sound and in good condition. Well-preserved skeletons have been exhumed in England that were known to be 2,000 years old. Fragments of human skeletons have been found in various parts of the United States, mingled with fossils of animals estimated to have existed not less than 100,000 years ago. Whether these are remains of the Mound-Builders has never been determined. All that is generally agreed is that the Mound-Builders occupied this country over a long period of time, and that they left it or were driven out by their successors in a very remote age of the past. It is an interesting commentary on this question to note this unintended discovery made 3,000 years ago by the Phoenicians and recorded by Diodorus Siculus. The story is regarded as authentic history. Over against Africa lies a very great island in the vast ocean, made days sail from Libya westward. The soil there is very fruitful, a great part whereof is mountainous, which is the most sweet and pleasant part, for it is watered by several navigable streams, and beautiful with many gardens of pleasure, planted with divers sorts of trees, and an abundance of orchards. The towns are adorned with stately buildings and banqueting houses pleasantly situated in their gardens and orchards. The Phoenicians, having found out the coasts beyond the Pillars of Hercules, sailed along by the coast of Africa. One of their ships, on a sudden, was driven by a furious storm far off into the main ocean. After they had lain under this violent tempest for many days, they at length arrived at this island. A problem that has always tantalized investigators of this race, and one that has never been fully solved, is who were the Mound-Builders, and where did they come from, and where did they go? The size and scope of the ancient Malay Empire forces one to the conclusion that they knew of the existence of and had visited America. Long before the time of Columbus, the Chinese and Japanese not only knew of America, but made regular voyages to some part of the American coast. They had named the country Fusang. The ancients of Europe knew of America and described it as a great Saturnian continent, larger than Asia, Europe, and Libya together. But it cannot be said that the Mound-Builders were the North American representatives of any of these races, for there is not a sufficient connection. A considerable number of people whose statements can be seriously considered believe the Mound-Builders were the survivors of the fabled continent of Atlantis. Just before the submergence of Atlantis about 12,000 years ago, the Atlantes living in the region now covered by the Gulf of Mexico began a migration up the Mississippi Valley. They spread all over central and eastern United States and named their new country Huena Tlapalan. After they had been there several thousand years, the Iroquois Indians came in from the northwest and expelled them. They went back down the Mississippi the way they had come and finally settled in Mexico. They arrived there both by boat across the Gulf and by going overland through Texas. In Mexico, they were what we know as the Toltecs, which is generally considered to be the first race to inhabit that country. Now, the foregoing is only theory, but there is such a considerable amount of evidence to support it that many persons regard it as fact. I will only give here some of the more important evidence that lends credence to the theory. In the first place, an etymological explanation of the words Atlas, Atlantic, Atlantis can be found only in Mexico and Central America. These words cannot be referred to any known language of the Old World. In the ancient Mexican Indian languages will be found at once the radical ATL, which has been defined as water, war, and the top of the head. From this is derived a series of words such as Atlan, meaning on the border of or amid the water. There are two persistent legends that one will encounter among all of the native Mexican and Central American Indian tribes. One is that the founders of the Toltecs were a group of strange, bearded white men who came from the east in ships. The other is that at about the same time there came overland via what is now Texas, a wandering nation of people, and that they came from an ancient empire far to the northeast called Huehuetlapalan because of an invasion by a warlike people. Note, in a future issue, we will present an article dealing more specifically with the Cahokia Mound, one of the most interesting from a mystical standpoint. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.